Afternoon, America. Brian Jane Blum here, and welcome you back to another episode of What the Fuck's Up. What I want to talk to you about today a little bit is about democracy, the SAVE Act and what's actually taking place in the United States, right? And democracy, what is it? It's a system of government in which the people themselves go vote and make decisions about themselves, their people, and how the government will function and how the state will function and how to distribute the benefits of society throughout society, right? It's active participation by the people in their own governance. And so the United States of America, we know, is not a democratic system, but it does have democratic processes. The democratic processes are primarily elections by Americans to elect those people who represent them in the running of government, right? We choose representatives to go make all of the decisions of government on our behalf. And that's the way our democratic system works. And so the question always becomes, right, who gets to participate in a democratic system? For example, if you go way back in time to the old Greeks and their forms of democracy, democracy isn't all of the people in the society get to vote. It's usually limited. Most societies throughout time have limited the participation in their democratic processes to people who are actually citizens of that community, or defined in many different ways. For example, when the United States first became a nation, we had a large population, but only a limited number of people were allowed to participate in democracy, right? You had to be a landowner, you had to be something along those lines in order to qualify for ballot access. And so, the debate today is sort of akin to the expansion of democratic processes over time within the United States, right? We see, the abolition of slavery and the expansion of the right to franchise to black males. We see the removal of poll taxes and other things that were intended to restrict access to the ballot to black males within the United States. So what we see taking place historically, right, we see women given the right to vote, is this expansion of who can participate in our democratic processes. The SAVE Act in the United States, the federal law already says that you must be a citizen of the United States to vote in federal elections. The SAVE Act is about whether or not we will allow those people who are not citizens of the United States of America to vote in our federal elections. That's what it's about. The Democrats want to expand the franchise to these millions and millions of people that they flooded into the United States under the Biden regime. And the Republicans want to say, hey, no, you have to be a citizen of the United States in order to vote in our elections. Well, what's been taking place, we have this expansion of democracy over time. And the question is, will we ultimately expand it to people who live beyond our borders? I mean, look what's happening in California. I saw a story recently about a bunch of Pakistanis living in Pakistan, not in California, who are voting in California's elections, right? We have a woman in California who registered her two dogs to vote. She voted on behalf of her dogs, right? She gets 3 votes. Most normal people only get 1 vote. What does that do to your vote? Right? They counted one of the dog's votes, but not the other dog's vote. And so do we expand democracy to include our pets? Right? What about the cat lady down the road who has 100 cats? Does she get 100 votes, whereas you only get 1? That is inconsistent with principles of democracy, wherein we each get 1 vote. What also has been taking place at the same time over the last 25 years is sort of, we look at democracy as the people participating in their elections, the people doing their elections. But that's not the case anymore, because basically what's been happening with elections is we have been going the other way. Elections have become very heavily centralized in the hands of a few people, right? And so instead of having all of the people, or whatever you define as your pool of people to engage in democracy, instead of having all of those people engaged in your elections, we have actually constricted it so that now we have a group of administrative, bureaucratic, unelected people who are actually running our elections, right? And we don't get to participate in that system anymore because of the advent of the machine, and they pushed it into our election systems. They have centralized polling centers so that we no longer vote at the precinct, the smallest level, where you go and you meet your neighbors and you cast your ballot. And then it's your neighbors who actually count and tabulate your ballots and send them in. And so our elections have become very anti-democratic because we have centralized them. If you look at the system of mail-in ballots used in the United States very heavily in large communities like Maricopa County, Arizona, or Fulton County, Georgia, you have the same processes take place. A small group of bureaucrats mail out ballots to millions of people using the United States Postal Service, right? Controlled by two very left-leaning liberal labor unions. They have very heavily centralized the process of who within the Postal Service gets to handle those ballots. Now, ensuring integrity of our elections, if we have the whole pool of Postal Service employees allowed to handle mail-in ballots, then we sort of cut down on the ability to use those ballots to engage in election fraud. But whenever you centralize that and you remove a significant number of people from participating in the delivery and the processing of those ballots, basically you invite fraud because you have a highly centralized group of people. The leadership is oftentimes chosen by those political partisans within the labor unions. These are things that people like Mark Elias and who's that other guy, States United, never remember his name. These are types of processes supported by these individuals who are out there talking about democracy. And what they really mean is something that is very anti-democratic because it removes the people from the process, right? And so what you need to do as citizens of the United States or residents of whatever community you happen to be in is to participate in this debate, right? Participate in this debate by saying, hey, are we going to expand democracy as we know it by electing our representatives to people who are not citizens of the United States of America, or are we going to keep it limited to people who are citizens of the United States of America and require proof of citizenship to vote? Or we can expand it. You also need to participate in the electoral front, where our elections have become very authoritarian and very anti-democratic. So you need to pay attention when Mark Elias says, oh, we need to implement this policy because we got to support democracy. You got to ask yourself, is this policy something that removes people from the process, places the handling of everything within a very small group of bureaucrats and administrators while excluding the vast majority of citizens from the process? And so democracy, folks, there are multiple angles of which we can look at democracy, right? Our participation in choosing elected representatives and our running of our own elections to choose those representatives. The more expansive you make the running of elections, the more you minimize the ability to engage in fraud, and the more legitimacy you give to those people who are elected to govern on our behalf. And so with that, I'm going to encourage you to participate, to stay active, and to actually think about what people are telling you. Is something democratic when they want to turn it over to bureaucrats and exclude you from it? And the answer to that question is no. It's anti-democratic. And so I would urge you to support democracy as we know it by supporting the SAVE Act, right? We citizens participate in our elections. Mexicans can participate in their elections. Indians can participate in theirs. Pakistanis can participate in theirs. And then we need to take the institutions of our elections back so that we can expand democracy in terms of electoral participation. And with that, I say peace.